presence, Miss Habiba Kahinde. How are you doing today?
Hi, I'm fine. Thank you. Thanks. It's really nice to see you guys again.
So without much ado, I want to welcome Camilla Nontra.
Yay!
Oh my goodness. I should come to you every day when I'm feeling when I need
Correct. This is Sudan.
Wow.
Sudan. Believe it or not, Sudan has more pyramids than Egypt.
Interesting.
Begin to think in a Pan-African way, because they now see that their conditions are not just about that local space, but the condition is linked to all of the other.
Hello. How are you doing? Good morning from California. Good afternoon if you're on the East Coast. Good evening if you live on the other side of the world. Well, this is the Pan-Afircana show. My name is Fred Nontra. We want to start by thanking God. By Him we live, we move, and have our being. And I'm here with my illustrious co-host, Jesse McCoy. How are you doing today, Jesse?
Man, I'm doing well. It is a beautiful day. We haven't North Carolina is great at this time of year because it gets warm and it gets sunny. I've gotten in my walk this morning, and I'm excited about being here with you once again, my friend.
Oh, good. Well, today we don't have a guest today, but you could be the guest. We're just going to discuss the current events, what's going on, the injustices that occurred last year, and this could be a turning point. Probably not to the extent of what Brown versus Board of Education was, but it could be a turning point. So much injustice has gone in the justice system against our brothers and sisters in the past. So if you don't know what I'm talking about the George Floyd case regarding Officer Chauvin. Derek Chauvin, whatever his name is, but
AKA the murderer. Yes,
AKA the murderer. And well, we have, luckily for us, we have one of our co-hosts is an attorney, so he could break it down for us. He's done a good job of breaking it down. If you follow him on Facebook, he does an excellent job of breaking it down. So I'm going to share the link. You can join us backstage, so we'll bring you out.
Yeah, definitely. If you all have questions, concerns, or you just want to comment about something,
you can also comment. Yeah,
join us. I guess I'll start, first by kind of giving people a breakdown of where we are in the trial. So for people who are not attorneys, the way that a trial works in the American judicial system is that we have a concept that you are innocent of what you've been accused of until your guilt is proven. And the proof of that guilt has to be beyond a reasonable doubt.
That's right.
So the burden of meeting that beyond a reasonable doubt standard rests with the state. That's the district attorney, the state's attorney. And how they do that is they have a case in chief where they present all of the witnesses that they think are going to be helpful in bolstering their case. The defense attorney has an opportunity to cross-examine each one of those witnesses that testifies as well. That in and of itself is just the normal trial process, but there are some things about Derek Chauvin's trial that are vastly different from what we usually see in a regular murder case. Thing number one is it is very, very rare to see police officers testifying in court against another police officer. Yes. And yet, in this case, we have not only a slew of officers testifying against Derek Chauvin, but we have the actual chief of police for the Minneapolis Police Department testifying against Derek Chauvin. Likewise, in murder cases, usually you're trying to put together pieces of circumstantial evidence to connect somebody to being in the locale where the crime actually happened. But in this case, we have about 9 people who are direct eyewitnesses to the event. Also, most murder cases aren't filmed, right? In this case, we have footage from traffic cameras. We have footage from officer body cameras. We have footage from the eyewitnesses' cell phones, security cameras. We have footage from every angle of every second of the interaction between Officer Chauvin and George Floyd. So depending on where you stand with these kinds of cases or with these kinds of events, some would argue, and I think I'll be in this number, will argue that the video speaks for itself. You've seen what you've seen, right? So you know what happened. Number two, people who don't feel that way would say, well, video doesn't tell you everything, right? That's what a defense counsel would say.
Just before you go, not mean to cut you off. I was just telling my wife yesterday, there's a difference between logic and law. Yeah, please continue.
Absolutely. And you know what? That's a great point that you bring up, because I understand the frustration that people have when they say, there's a video, why are we even going through all of this? We know that's a murder, right?
Yes.
But the problem is, and I'm not going to say it's a problem, because in most cases, it actually works out in the favor of the defendant, who, particularly if they're wrongfully charged. But the problem is, in America, because of that innocent until proven guilty standard, you have to go through a court disposition to get a judgment. And that court disposition is not guaranteed. There is no such thing, no matter what Perry Mason or Matlock or Judge Judy or anybody tells you about court, there is no slam dunk case, right? Cases have to be won. So what the state's strategy is right now is to flood you with sensory overload. They've played every single video clip they have. They've had you talking to eyewitnesses, one as young as 9 years old, talking about the trauma that seeing this has caused. They've had you talking to, at this point, pulmonologists who could tell you how the flow of oxygen into your lungs was somehow disrupted, and allude to the fact that it was disrupted because of Officer Chauvin. We've also got medical examiners now who are testifying about causes of death. Police officers testifying about standard operating practices. So all of these things are factors that the jury gets to hear. The concern that we have, particularly people who are, if you're a Black American here, you see all the evidence and you know straight up that this is murder, but you have a sinking feeling in the pit of your stomach. Because you also know that this is America, and we've seen videos of people getting beat up and the officers being found not guilty. Yeah, Rodney King wasn't that long ago, right?
Yes.
So we know that all it takes is one juror to say, I don't believe it, and Derek Chauvin wins, right?
Oh, because there might be is that what we call a hung jury?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
Okay.
If he gets one person convinced and they dig in their heels that they don't want to convict, then he's not going to get the murder case. On top of that, murder isn't the only thing that he's been charged with. So they could always do something that's lesser. He could get convicted of, let's say, a manslaughter. And I think the frustration that Black America will feel comes from the fact that a manslaughter conviction would likely be followed with a short jail sentence and probation, whereas George Floyd is never coming back. Right?
Exactly.
So these are all the things that are going on. And again, if anybody watching has questions or comments or wants to jump in on some part or aspect of what they saw, definitely feel free. Reach out. We've put our links up in the chat, in the comments. So send us a comment and let us know. But go ahead. I'm sorry. So could he also be charged with both the second degree and manslaughter? Could both be stuck? And if so, how long is he likely to be put away? So right now he's charged with second degree murder. Minnesota has a third degree murder charge. Then there's voluntary murder, voluntary manslaughter. So for people who are non-lawyers, like, murder has different levels depending on your state. Most states recognize first degree and second degree. The difference is, because people asked on Facebook, why wasn't he charged with first degree? First degree murder requires premeditation and deliberation in most jurisdictions. So typically you see first degree murder, classic examples like serial killers, like people who plotted out who they were going to go after, what they were going to do, and they waited for this person and they led them into a trap and then did what they were going to do. It's very hard. It's a very hard standard to meet. And if you don't get it, and the person gets found not guilty, then that person gets free to walk out, do what they want to do.
Exactly.
Second degree murder is your more common murder. And all that is that you took the life of another human being with what they call malice. And malice can be defined in many different ways. So it could be intentional. It could be reckless behavior. So for instance, if you go outside and you're upset because you've gotten in an argument with somebody, and maybe you didn't intend to kill them, but you got into a fist fight with them and they died. Well, guess what? That's still murder, right?
Yes,
that's murder.
It is.
So, those are the levels for murder. And then manslaughter, typically you see in most jurisdictions, there's a voluntary manslaughter and then there's a involuntary manslaughter. So just to give people examples, voluntary manslaughter, you come home early from work, wife is in bed with someone else, you're upset, you go off, you kill somebody, right?
Yeah.
It's voluntary manslaughter. It's not necessarily murder, right? Because you're in the heat of passion. It's you were upset about what happened and you were spontaneous with it, but you still took a life. So there's going to be a punishment for that. Yeah. Involuntary manslaughter is your classic. Somebody got intoxicated before they got behind the wheel of a car and got into a car accident that took the life of someone else, unfortunately. Well, that's involuntary manslaughter. I didn't mean to kill anybody, but I put myself in a situation where this was a possible outcome and it happened, right? The difference being is that for your manslaughter charges, typically the sentencing for that is going to be more lenient than murder, because manslaughter, there's a belief system that there's something out there that caused it. But for this situation, this person wouldn't be dead. So, but for you being drunk and behind the wheel of a car, this person wouldn't be dead. Then, it lessens it. It's not like you went out there with the intent of killing somebody like a murderer would. And what we're trying to figure out with Derek Chauvin is, what was his intent, right? The video infers that his intent was to put his knee on the neck of George Floyd while he was handcuffed, preventing his oxygen supply from getting into his body and thus suffocating him, right? But what the defense is trying to show is that George Floyd, in their view, was intoxicated and was being combative towards the officers, and that this was merely a restraint gone wrong. So the difference for us as a populace is when it comes to things like manslaughter, ordinarily you would say, well, Jesse, he's got his knee on his neck. Even if he said this was to restrain him because somebody's been combative, that's still manslaughter. Here's the difference. For police officers, they are legally allowed to exercise the degree of force necessary to sustain or resist the person who is coming at them, right? Yes. So that's his out. If you can get it reduced to, well, George Floyd was high and combative, and as a result, I used force, and it just so happens he passed away. Well, now it falls under your police duties, and you will be found not guilty, right?
Yes.
I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm just saying this is the defense's theory of the case, and the reason why they're going so hard to try to tarnish George Floyd for being found with drugs and for, allegedly being high on the day of. They're doing this because they want you to have this opportunity to, or at least not you, the jury, to have the opportunity to say, hey, this is a black guy who was on something and was definitely afraid of police and was combative. And unfortunately in America, it doesn't take much to get a jury convinced of that, because a lot of jurors already think negatively about black men, right? Yes. It's sheer racism. If you're afraid of black men and you think black men don't follow the law, you think black men who are, in this case, I think covers levels from, there's mental health issues with George Floyd because he was talking about how he'd been shot previously by an officer by mistake, right? So he's got PTSD from that. You've got the racial level of whether or not he was intoxicated. Does that warrant someone being killed on the side of the road? We've got lots of cases where intoxicated people who are not black get to jail or even get let go to go home and clean up, right? So there's that. But in America, unfortunately, race is always sitting at the table with counsel, even though it may never be properly addressed appropriately.
Yeah. So Yeah, there's so many levels to this. So, first of all, he he was cuffed. I mean, if I remember the situation well, he was cuffed. Now, I haven't been following this because it's too emotionally draining for me, and I know a lot of us feel the same way. First of all, he was cuffed, so he was probably there's no way he was running away, and he was laying down. So, to the extent where he has to kneel on him for 9 minutes, I mean, there's no defense to that.
Absolutely. I would agree with you. I think the defense, what they're trying to do is they've pieced together the parts of the video that they feel help them. Part number one is the initial encounter with the police. What you see, which is just not normal, these officers were called for an alleged counterfeit $20 bill, right? Yeah. In Minneapolis, they call that forgery. It's not forgery in North Carolina, but in Minneapolis, they call it forgery. And so the police officer arrives on the scene when George Floyd is sitting in a car in the driver's side, and the police officer already has a gun out pointing at George Floyd. Now, he has been shot a year ago by police on accident, right? Yeah. So when he looks up and sees a police with a gun out, of course, he's freaking out, right? And he's like, look, I'm sorry, officer. I'm sorry, but I've been shot before by police. You know, y'all shot me accidentally. I'm nervous about it. And you can tell he's nervous. They're trying to say that the nerves are coming from him being intoxicated. And maybe, I don't know, but I definitely know if you've been shot by a police officer before and a police just runs up with a gun in your face, doesn't announce anything or say anything, I certainly understand where your fear would be at that point. Yeah. The second thing is, George Floyd mentions, I mean, he's very respectful when they get him out the car. He's talking, but he mentions that he's claustrophobic when they try to put him in the back seat of the police car. Yeah. For our viewers who never have had the experience of being in the back of a police car, hopefully you have. But if you have, it's dark and it's closed in. If you are claustrophobic, being in the back of a police car is not for you, right? And so he tells them I'm claustrophobic, and he gives them alternatives. He says, I'll lay on the ground, I'll stand up against the wall, I'll do whatever else you want me to do, but please don't put me in the police car. I'm claustrophobic. Yeah. And what do the officers do? Put him in the police car, right? So he gives him the police car. He's still not trying to be combative. And he says, can you at least leave the door open? Right? Yeah. If you leave the door open, I'll try to manage. But the police say no. And this is where we have to have a conversation in this country, particularly, about what is the scope of policing, right? Is policing really about the safety of the community and service to the community? Or is policing more so about control, right? Because he's not fighting the officer at that point. Yeah. He's handcuffed. He's not doing anything. But when they try to push him in and force him into, he's already told them he is uncomfortable, and close him in, then you can't tell what's going on in the car, but there's a shuffle. It seemed to me that the shuffle was the set of police officers on one side trying to push him in and close the door, and the set of police officers on the other side trying to pull him out. And it seems like they were causing the shuffle more so than anything that he was doing. He was just freaking out in the back seat because he's claustrophobic. And whatever happens, they end up pulling him out, laying him on the ground while he's handcuffed. And this is when Derek Chauvin commences to putting his knee in George Floyd's neck, right? And everybody sees this. And I think it's also telling the angle, right? So George Floyd is on the inside of the car, of the street where the traffic is. Yeah. If you were just walking by and didn't see it from the angle behind the car, you would think, oh, the police are just arresting somebody. You wouldn't even see Derek Chauvin with his knee on George Floyd's neck. Yeah. But the problem is there was a bus stop right behind where this was happening. And the bus stop was largely kids, high school, who were waiting for the bus. And they saw this happening. And you know, high schools now got phones. So they all got their phone, start recording. Passers-by saw the high school kids recording, so they came and joined over, and they started trying to tell the officer, get your knee off his neck. Yeah. And the officer refused to do it. He continued to keep his knee on George Floyd's neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. So I often wonder, if there were no kids at that bus terminal or at that bus stop, would the officer have felt like he could get away with it? Because he didn't do this on the sidewalk. They had no problem with George Floyd in the sidewalk. So I think those factors, those little things, really are the details that hammer in the reason why a murder conviction is appropriate. Because I definitely think he thought he was going to get away with this. And we also know that Officer Chauvin has a list of things that he has violated in the past. So he just thinks he's above the law.
Yeah. And then, okay, so to look at it from a different angle, I saw pieces of the brother who's the MMA fighter.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I mean, he I mean, in my opinion, he brought the house down with his because they try to paint him as, oh, did you say, oh, F you up and all that? And he said, I said what I said. And I was like, wow, I'm really proud of this guy. Mm-hmm. Although I don't subscribe to that language. I mean, but it's how people express their opinions, especially when someone is frustrated. And he told them that, yeah, he's going to mess them up. If they didn't have guns, he probably would have, because he's a trained fighter and he could actually tell the guy was losing his life. And that's how, in MMA, when they have a chokehold, the referee, the person is gonna lift up their hand and the referee will stop it because it's over. They don't want someone dying on their hands while fighting. So that's all to say that. So what was your take on his testimony?
So that guy was amazing. And I'll tell you the thing that makes it even better beyond all that. He called the police on the police. So they actually played the recording of him calling the police to say that this police officer is acting crazy. And he was frustrated. So he ends up hanging up, but he had told them, hey, this guy's down here. He's acting crazy. He's doing this. There's a group of us telling him to get off this man's neck. He's not doing it. So that brings into this quintessential question of who polices the police, right? So he's like, I'm calling. I don't know if they're going to do anything, but thank God he did, because now we have that record for the state to enter in as evidence in the trial. On top of that, another telling thing is they had Officer Chauvin's supervisor testify against him at the trial. And the supervisor says when he got there, Chauvin told him, well, EMTs came to take George Floyd to the hospital. And Chauvin omitted telling him that he had put his knee on that man's neck. So he didn't find out until after George Floyd had passed away, when Chauvin finally revealed, well, there was a struggle and I put my knee on his neck. Now, this struggle that Chauvin claims he was having doesn't seem to appear on anybody's video cam.
Yeah.
So, I don't know what the struggle exactly was. I also know that there were, it wasn't like he didn't have warnings. There were tons of people telling him to get off. He refused to do it. So, and we even had testimony from the clerk at Cup Foods, where George Floyd had just been in to purchase something. And that clerk said, I wish, knowing what I know now, I would have just paid the $20. Like, it's not that serious, but the store had a policy that was very draconian. And the policy is if you get paid in a counterfeit 20, then the $20 comes out of your paycheck. So he was sent out by the manager to question George Floyd about the $20 that they thought was fake. And he at the end of the day, they ended up calling the police, but they did not intend for this to happen. They were just trying to cross-reference the money, right?
Yeah.
So I think that all of these things kind of factor in, and I'm glad you picked up on the fact that the defense counsel was trying to paint this MMA fighter as an angry black man. Yeah. Because, like I said, racism is always at the table, right?
Yeah.
So if he can convince one juror that this guy is just an angry black man who doesn't like police and the police were going to be wrong regardless of what happened, then that juror is going to say, no, police are always right, and I'm not going to pick the police for doing his job. So that's where we are right now. And nobody, right now you see that they're doing a great job of not focusing on the jury. They don't put cameras on the jury because you're not supposed to know who is on that jury. Because imagine from back in the days in the 30s and 40s, jurors' names and addresses and all that used to be public. And that was back when people had those mob trials with mob bosses who'd be like, oh, yeah, your kid goes to Pinkston Street Elementary. Yeah. Folks missing, right? So they try to protect the jurors during the trial. And then afterwards, there'll probably be a period of time. I'm not sure about Minnesota law, but there'll probably be a period of time before the jurors are allowed to speak. And once they are allowed to speak, that's when you'll hear, maybe they don't even identify themselves. They might just be, I'm juror number 7 and I wrote a book, or I'm juror number 7 and I'm on with Barbara Walters tonight, whatever. You can hear the voice. But they want to protect people because they know that these cases, particularly when you're dealing with mobs, gangs, the police, right? There's retribution all the time. And, you know, this is just America. This is how we were created and invented by gangs. So one of the fears is if you, one, they don't want anybody to be able to get access to you to influence you, because the old 1930s mob boss, he would kidnap your kids until you made a decision, right? And hopefully that decision is right if you expect to get your kids back. But now we try to protect people so that they're not going to be influenced or pressured, because even worse than the mob was, now people got social media. So they can go to social media, they can find all your stuff, they can send you death threats via Facebook, you know, and so we want to protect jurors and the sanctity of our court system. But at the same time, like, we as a public don't get to know who's on the jury. So for all we know, it could be all white people. It could be all racist white people. And, you know, that plays a factor. I tell everybody, you know, law is one of those things where we have really great idealistic standards in our American legal system about what we want it to be, but it's always going to be a creature of the locale that the trial is in. So if you think about the 1950s and 60s, the guys who killed Emmett Till, they had a trial. They went to trial. They were found not guilty. Why? Because their neighbors were the freaking jury, right? And those are the people who go to the Klan rally with them and who celebrate them. So they're not going to be held accountable. Where you go, you know, usually when you go to a more diverse community, like your New York Cities and your LA, stuff like that, you're going to have a wider range of the populace, and you're going to have some people who unfortunately have had some bad run-ins with police, who understand that police aren't the gospel. They aren't the end all be all. And some police are bad. The state's job in most cases in jury selection is to try to weed out those people. And I wish I could tell you guys that there was a system in place to make sure that race is eliminated from this, but it's not. Typically when the state's prosecuting, they're going to want conservative white people who love the police. That's who they want. Defense attorneys are going to want young, college-educated minorities, because we understand the realities that we have to live in. And everybody gets a certain number of challenges depending on your jurisdiction. But once your challenges are over, that's it. You deal with what you got left. And even when I used to do my jury selection, you look at the jury pool of people who are remaining to take the place of somebody you would strike. And it can be rough if the jury pool is all conservative white people. And I got, you know, just, you know, I've got maybe not as many minorities as I would want. There's no guarantee that if I strike this person, they won't be replaced by another one. So it's a guessing game. But because we don't know who it is, we don't know the makeup of the jury. We only get to see in the proceedings the judge, and the judge in a jury trial. And this is why I want to just do a plug for people doing jury duty, because folks try to dodge it, but we really should do it. The judge in this case, and in all jury trials, the judge has very limited power. I think one of the hallmarks of the American legal system, as opposed to legal systems I've studied in other countries, is the American legal system. If you have a jury trial, the power rests with the jury, right? The judge determines what evidence can come in, what the jury gets to see, right? And there's some degree of power in that. But at the end of the day, the judge doesn't make a decision. The judge is just trying to make sure that the information that is admitted to the jury is legally authorized to be admitted. And if you get the information, the jury can do what they want to do with it.
Yeah.
So, we're all waiting to see what a jury of peers are going to say about whether or not an officer in America can be convicted of murder in the line of duty when they actually murder somebody at work. This would be unprecedented. We've never seen this before, right?
Yeah.
At least not successfully. We haven't seen them be.
But there was a guy. What about the guy? Was it some part of North Carolina where the guy took off running and he shot him in his back? That guy was convicted.
That was South Carolina.
South Carolina.
Difference in that was the Walter Scott case.
Walter Scott, yeah, that's the name. Yeah.
Difference in that is that one, the video. This is one where the videotape was everything, right? Like you shot somebody in the back. There's no way to get away with it. Right. Number two, there was a huge push because you got to remember Walter Scott came up during the time of Dylan Roof and South Carolina was jumping. It was on the verge of people going out here knocking heads off because South Carolina, particularly that Charleston low country area, is very black. I don't know if you all read the stories about the slave trade, but Charleston was a big slave port. And black people after slavery didn't really move from Charleston. They still stayed in the surrounding areas. So it was always, even during slavery, they were always concerned about uprisings because the number of black people was like 8-1. Black people, white people there.
Wow.
When things like that, you go into a black church in a black city and kill black people, that's somebody got paid for that, right? Yeah. And it just so happens those cases came pretty close together. I think the climate can make a difference, not to mention your jury is going to be different, right? So if you got more black people, you're going to have more black people on the jury. Black people who are listening to this program, if you get a summons for jury duty, please go to jury duty. I know you don't want to. We all know you don't want to be there, but please go, because oftentimes most of the cases that you're going to be sitting on aren't going to be big national headline cases. They're going to be cases involving teenage black kids, right? Who made a stupid mistake or who were just in the wrong place at the wrong time or who are being accused of something that they haven't done at all, right? And if you aren't there to understand that perspective and to bring that into the decision making, then that perspective goes out the window. Because I can assure you, 50-year-old Donald Trump supporter is not going to stand the plight of a 17-year-old black man in the inner city. It's not going to happen.
That's right. Wow. So, this is great. So, I think I also had a little bit of, I read it. I didn't watch it. The police chief, he doubled down on it. So, how was the cross-examination by the defense then?
So, with this defense counsel, I think his name is Eric Nelson. He's a little different. Like we in our attorney circles here in North Carolina have been commenting on both the state and the defense counsel because they're doing things way different than what we would do. Ordinarily, if you have a chief of police who is testifying, what you would want to do is you would try to exploit the things that you don't have, right? So the chief of police wasn't present at the time that this happened. What that means is you really don't know what happened.
What happened? Yeah.
He didn't go that route, though. He went a different route of trying to establish standards. And I just feel like the person who is the least likely, the person you do not want to talk about,
exactly.
Is the chief of police, because he's going to be like, I know everything. I've been through the ranks. He was talking about his record. He got promoted every 2 years. So he didn't just become a chief because he's friends with somebody in politics. He became a chief because he's a decorated, amazing officer for over 30 years. So, so it's you. I don't know you want to necessarily go against them when it comes to policies and procedures, because they're on top of it. But that's the route he chose. I don't think it was successful. I think what he was trying to do was get him to admit that, we all know policing is a difficult job. And we all know that a certain degree of the interaction with folks can change how an officer processes things, because the goal of the officer is to, to get home, right?
Yeah.
Job and get home to your own family. So I think that they were trying to get the chief to say, oh, yeah, well, if the situation deviates and the officer feels like his life is threatened, he then has the opportunity to use more force than what would ordinarily be deemed reasonable, because he needs to subdue the assailant and get home. But even though he gave them that hypothetically, he was like, that's not what happened here. We all see the video, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, Michael has a question. But to go off of that, okay, let's get to Michael's question. So what are the criteria for selecting members of a given jury? I think Michael came a little late, so.
Well, ordinarily, anybody who pays taxes in a given county is basically up for jury duty. It's just a matter of when is your summons coming, right?
Exactly.
So you're going to get a summons at some point in your life, and they're going to say, come in for jury duty. That doesn't mean you'll make the actual jury. That means that you have to report to the jury pool.
Yeah.
The jury pool, what they do is in court, they'll cast a wide net to get roughly about 200 people to come to court. We're only going to need 12 for the trial. So what they'll do is they'll assign everybody either a letter or a number, and then the sheriff will come in and say, numbers 1 through 30 come into the courtroom. You go into the courtroom, and the first 12 people get seated in the jury, and the attorneys, through a process called voir dire, get to question those jurors to kind of get insight into, are they biased? Are they able to sit on these cases?
Yeah.
One of the things I want to emphasize to people is, if you are biased, it is okay to be biased. Like, people sometimes feel weird about admitting it, but there are some cases that are just not built for you, right? So for me, classic example, I couldn't sit on a jury that involves anything that deals with child molestation or anything dealing with kids. I'm sensitive about kids.
Yeah.
So to me, it wouldn't be fair, because maybe the person really is innocent of what they've been accused of. Once I hear you a child molester, so it's different, right? And it's like that for everything. Murder cases aren't for everybody. But the whole point of the attorneys asking you questions is, we're trying to see if the bias raises to the level as such that it would impact your ability to be impartial on this case. And the problem that I see with this, particularly when it comes to minority communities, is we're so focused on trying to get out of there that we try to say whatever we want to say that's going to get us eliminated. But the conservative, Trump-supporting 50-year-old, former cop, he knows, and he's like, oh, no, nothing could affect me. I would never be biased to the point that I couldn't be impartial, even though we know that he's going to be biased and he's going to be biased. So, we have to be careful kind of what we do and go in with good faith. A little bit of bias doesn't mess you up. It's just if that bias impacts your ability to be impartial. And they'll just keep doing that until we run out of challenges. So once both sides run out of challenges, you're stuck with the jury you got. Everybody else in the jury pool goes home. That's it. Your day's over.
Yeah. So Michael said, who is responsible for the selection of the members of the jury? Do you factor in the fact of a particular race of the accused person or defendant in selection of the members of the jury?
Great question. So as far as who is responsible for the selection of the jury, it's kind of, they keep filling the 12 seats, and we use our challenges until the challenges are over. So each side in North Carolina, we've got 6 challenges, and then you could do other challenges to strike for other cause, but you have to address that with the judge. There are 6 challenges you can do, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. I just want to strike juror 2, 3, and 4. Thank you for your service. And that's it. But once you run out of your challenges, you're stuck with whatever jury that you have left. As far as factoring in the race of the accused person or defendant, I think that in America, race is always at the table, right? So the state, in most cases, because they're typically prosecuting disproportionately minority defendants. So the state wants to get people who they feel like are going to be willing to convict. And nobody likes convicting minorities better than senior white people, right? So that's who they're going for. It's not right. It's not necessarily constitutional, we've got things like bats and challenges that you can do to challenge whether or not race is the basis for it. But the problem is race is the basis for everything. So really everybody could be charged with being somewhat biased. Likewise, the defense counsel typically wants young, educated minorities because they understand how it works. But every side gets 6 challenges. And once those challenges are over, that's it. That's your jury. The defendant, I think the only person who really cares about the defendant's presentation in court is going to be the defendant's attorney. So if I'm the defense attorney, of course, I want to make sure that the jury is reflective of who my defendant is, the community that my defendant is from, and I want my defendant to not look like a defendant. So if he's in custody, we're going to bring a suit. We're going to put him in a suit, take the cuffs off of him. Looking at him and saying, oh, he's guilty just because they got cuffs on him, because there are a lot of innocent people that get cuffed up too.
Yeah.
Likewise, though, your defendant's got to help you out. And I can tell y'all a million stories about cases that I've had that the defendant showed up for court all kinds of wrong. Classic example. If you are charged with driving while intoxicated, please don't come to court with a Budweiser jacket on. Please don't. Please don't. Like, this is a bad look, man. Crown Royal bags. Like, don't do that. Don't do that. It's a bad look. So you always want to kind of, as a defense attorney, you always want to prep your client for the fact that people are going to be judging everything that you do. So if you are on trial for a crime that involves some aspect of assault, you want to make sure that your client looks friendly, right? Don't come to court looking like you're going to beat somebody up, because people will read that, right? Yeah. If somebody says something that you don't like somebody might say something understand about your mom, like whatever, you don't have the luxury of being able to get mad because somebody says something about your mom, because you're here because people think you're beating people up. So you have to clean it up, right? And I hate to do this, but I always throw back to the old cases of the 1930s and 40s with the mob bosses. Do you know why mob bosses come to court in Italian-made nice suits? Because it's very hard to convict somebody who's wearing a nice suit and smiling at you. It's very hard. It's hard for people to put together that you are the same person that's committing massacres on Valentine's Day.
John Gotti.
Yes.
Even more recently, that's more like late 90s, right?
It's very, very difficult, man.
Yeah. Because
people want to believe a smiling face. And smiling face, if it doesn't link up with the evidence that everybody's looking at, they want to convict. I'm not convict. They want to acquit you. Mm-hmm. But if you come looking like a serial killer and you charged with being a serial killer, then guess what? I mean, even if you're not, people are going to say, he looked like he probably killed 4 or 5 people. So that's just the way it goes. But race is always going to be, I think, a factor in America, unless you are fortunate enough to live in a city that is so racially diverse. And again, when I say diverse, I don't mean it's a few Black people or a few people, a few Latinos here and there. I don't mean that. Yeah. I mean like New York City. Be like LA. Like you need somewhere that everybody is here. Because if you down south, like you are Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, and you not in the city centers where Black people at, if you in Vicksburg, Virginia, it's not gonna work out well for you, right? Mm-hmm. So but all of these things go into play for our American system. And again, I'm making fun of it somewhat, but our system can deviate also between the states. So this case that we're talking about is in Minnesota. Their court system is going to look a little different from the court system I practice in North Carolina, or what somebody else might be exposed to in California, Texas, or New York. We also have a federal system, and the federal system is a little bit more streamlined because the federal judges are appointed, so they don't necessarily have an incentive to do anything a certain way. It's not a political position that you have to run for office. It's just you're appointed by a president and approved by Congress, though confirmed by Congress. But also the process is similar in that federal court relies heavy on precedent. And I think one of the things that disturbs me about federal court is precedent is very difficult to get a judge to go against. Precedent is everything. And half of the precedent that we have in a federal system is racist and wrong, right? So once the precedent is established, in order to be able to overturn it, you have to have data. I mean, like the best and most brilliant minds from Harvard, Yale, Stanford had to have researched this issue for 10 years. People forget, even when Thurgood Marshall took these cases for Brown versus Board of Education, all the way up to the Supreme Court, what supported him getting heard in the Supreme Court was a study done by a team of black psychologists called the doll test, where they had been studying kids and giving them dolls that were different colors and making the kids draw out, adjectives to describe the dolls. And consistently what was happening is the kids, no matter what the race of the kid was, were describing the darker dolls with bad adjectives and the white dolls with good adjectives. And the whole point was to show that being in a system of Jim Crow, where you have allegedly separate but equal, creates this inference of inferiority in people. And this is a study that was happening way before the case, right? Like this something that's already happened. But it just so happened that that research matched up with the arguments that Thurgood Marshall was trying to make in Brown versus Board of Education, to the point that the Supreme Court of the United States said, we'll hear it. We'll hear it and see what happens. And he ended up winning, right? So I say all that to say, the court system, there's no such thing as a perfect court system in any country, in any state, anywhere. It's a human system, and if there are humans involved, there's going to be human error. The key, though, is about consistency. What Black people in America are complaining about, and the reason they're upset, is because this system has consistently devalued Black people and our experiences and our humanity. So it seems like anybody can kill us and there's no accountability. But if we get accused of murders that we didn't even commit, people are going to be sitting in prison or on death row for 20 years. And you just hope that either Jesus or Brian Stevenson walks through the door and is going to fight your case to get you up out of here, right? And we hear every day people who are being exonerated for crimes they didn't commit, DNA that didn't match.
Exactly.
But the problem is, if you're poor and you're Black in America, the likelihood of you having access to those kinds of resources, very small. So that's it.
That reminds me of a case recently. The guy was thrown away for 38 years. So 38 years of lost, relationships, 38 years of, time with family, 38 years, wasted away, gone into thin air. You can't get it back, So it's definitely a problem. Yeah. Now, so I wanted to go to, so what happens for a case to be taken to the federal system? So like in a case like a popular one where we all watched the movie and Denzel played him, the boxer who passed away.
Hurricane.
Hurricane. So what happened? It's been a while since I watched that. What made it into a federal case? Why did it take it from the lower courts to the federal courts?
So the federal court system is weird in that, one, you can go to the federal court system if there's been a violation of your constitutional rights. There's something called federal question jurisdiction. So if you feel like, classic example, with police, you can't take the police to a criminal court in federal court. You can't sue them civilly for a violation of your rights. That's what they call a 1983 case, based on the number of the statute, for violating your constitutional rights. You also can get into the federal system because the federal system does have some criminal cases that are on the books. So classic example, terrorism, right? Yeah. You commit an act of terrorism, that is a violation of federal law, and the federal prosecutors can come after you. Most commonly, you see federal cases when there's drug trafficking, when there's gang / mafioso type dealings, because they have this power under what's called the RICO Act, which is racketeering and all that. But if you're engaged in organized crime as a business and you're using drugs or you're using prostitution or you're using whatever, and you're doing it across state lines, they can bring you in on the RICO and try to put you away. Now, this is a big thing that I tell people because we got folks who watch the show, we got folks who listen to me from all over who are engaged in all kinds of things, right? And I don't judge. I don't judge. But what I'll say is this. If you had an option between being prosecuted by your county district attorney versus being prosecuted by a federal prosecutor, we're going to take that county district attorney because the federal prosecutor, first of all, the conviction rate in federal court is like 89%. Right? They're going to get you. And there's a reason why it's 89%. The agencies that your county DA uses is the county sheriff and the police department. They make mistakes.
Many resources. Yeah.
Right. They make mistakes all the time. Right. The resources that a federal prosecutor uses is the FBI, right? The CIA. These are people who they've been following you since you were born. They got your social security number. They see where you were at. They got all your ATM transactions, the whole nine. So you see in federal court, it's more so of a plea factory because it's better to plead to a year and a day, right? And you can have hope as opposed to getting convicted. If you get convicted in federal court, the likelihood of us seeing you again is very small. Even the sentencing guidelines, when I was learning in the federal system, they'll send you a sentencing guideline that's like, oh yeah, the punishment for this crime is 250. And I'm like, 250 days, that's not a year, that's not bad. And they're like, no, that's months. That's 250 months. So people try to stay away from federal stuff unless you are like a Donald Trump type or a Jeff Bezos type and you got billions of dollars to be able to have those fights. Most people not going to have it. That's not to say that the federal prosecutors shouldn't be challenged and that you can't win at all, but I just want people to know what you're going up against. I tell everybody it's a difference between the police department pulling up at your house and arresting you versus the ATF getting out of black Suburbans, kicking doors in. So a different level, right? Different level. And then the last thing I'll say is when you look at sentencing, so if you get convicted in the county that you live in, they're going to send you to a jail somewhere in the state, right? But if it's in the state, like a state like North Carolina, it takes about 5 hours to get from coast to mountains. Yeah. So at some point, not 5 hours, it takes about 8 hours to get through, but wherever you aren't that far away. You can do a drive to see your relative that's in custody. When you go into custody in the federal system, you get Indiana. Tagged in the Bureau of Prisons. The court doesn't even control where you get housed. The Bureau of Prisons will pick based on their availability. And they're going to send you to places like Leavenworth, Kansas, or Podunk, Colorado, right?
So Angola, wasn't it?
Angola, Louisiana. Yeah, absolutely. Places that your family couldn't get to if they had $1 million. They're going to send you so far away, and they're going to sit you in a little bitty room by yourself, and they're going to probably hand you a tray with food and a razor blade, hoping that you take advantage of the opportunity, right? So it's not the same if you don't have money to play that game. I'd rather y'all not be involved in the court system at all. But if you are, and you decide to play that game, just understand the consequences. Because, they used to do shows. I used to follow American Gangster, where they would follow all the big time criminals that made a name for themselves and got rich, and bank robbers, drug dealers, the whole nine, right? And what happens is for the ones who don't get killed and who are still out here, they have to send you letters from jail. They don't get to appear on the camera. They have to write a letter on a little bitty piece of cardboard paper, right, to get it to the producers just to give their opinion on what happened or tell their version of the story. And even that took Herculean effort to get them included. So it's not a game. I tell everybody stay away from a life of crime to the extent possible. You do not want any of these problems. Y'all have seen documentary after documentary. You know what happens in these jails. If you're not built to be at war 24/7, you will be somebody's girlfriend in jail. It's just keeping it real with you.
Yeah.
If you are, I mean, again, jail is one of those things where like you can't go to jail and say, I'm just going to do my time and that's it. You go to jail, it's racialized. So you got to immediately get with your group. Then there's a lot of gang activity in jail. You don't get the liberty of saying, I'm going to avoid the gangs. No, you in a gang now, right? And that stuff is going to haunt you for the rest of your life unless you built for that, right? Some people are built for that. But if you're not built for it and you just want to work a regular 9-to-5 job and take care of your family, prison is not the place for you. So think about that. And if that doesn't deter you, think about the fact that attorneys who handle cases, particularly federal cases, I don't know any attorney who's going to federal court for less than $40,000, right?
Mm.
And we talking like, you need to give me 10 stacks up front. This is not happening. So if you can't afford the lawyer fees, you probably can't afford the litigation costs, and you definitely can't afford to do the long 250-month prison sentence and not see your family for 250 months. Like, you don't want that. You don't want those problems.
Yeah. Again, so before we go, I have a question, but if you haven't done so already, please subscribe. Hit the thumbs up button, like our Facebook page, follow us on Instagram, and you get some of these great discussions that we have. And we have a whole list of guests we have for you in the next few weeks. So at least this case gives me some hope. I mean, I remember I couldn't watch that one, the Trayvon Martin case, and the prosecutors did such a horrible job. It's almost like they were working for the defense, because all the witnesses that came in, they brought a police chief who was just, telling how good a person Zimmerman was. This next officer comes talk about how good a person. It's almost like it was a setup. I started watching and I just gave up and stopped watching it. What was the take on that?
I mean,
the difference.
Trayvon Martin was a whole, like, to me, I think that's where I lost my faith in the justice system.
Yeah.
Mainly because this was a person. This wasn't a police officer. George Zimmerman was just a guy who was a wannabe police officer.
Yeah.
And he's doing, security, but nobody paid him to do in order to determine who should be in the neighborhood and who shouldn't. And he goes after this little black kid, which always makes me nervous because, with black kids, first of all, you don't know, it's people over here. I mean, I don't want to, tarnish the show, but it's people over here who like prey on black kids, like they molest white kids, like whatever. So you talking about a kid that's walking back at nighttime from the store, and you, a grown man, get out the car and start assailing this kid. Now, I think what really happened is he ran up on this kid. The kid was on the phone the whole time talking to his friend, and we ran up on Trayvon Martin. I think Trayvon Martin said, well, he's been following me all these blocks. I'm just going to fight. I was taught fight and get home, right?
Yeah.
So I think he started winning the fight. I think he beat George Zimmerman up. And I think George Zimmerman, then, you know how it is, like in a fight, your masculinity is on the line now.
Yeah.
So you just got beat up by a kid. You can't let that story go and go forward. So now you want to escalate.
Yeah.
And I think that was unfair because, you're armed and the kid is not, and it's still a kid, right? And you put yourself in the situation. So he kills a kid that beat him up for doing what the kid was supposed to do, right?
Yeah.
And to see the amount of coddling that the court system did to his concerns, right? Like, well, he was trying to look out for the safety of the community. He's a great guy. He does this. He's trying to make sure we're safe, right? And the fact that I think the prosecutors, again, this is a disconnect. We also don't have a lot of black people who are in prosecutorial offices. So if we don't have black people who are prosecutors, you don't have anybody there to really voice what Trayvon Martin's perspective on this was. And he's not here to say anything.
Yeah.
So we saw prosecutors kind of bumbling to put together a case against George Zimmerman, but they don't necessarily have all the facts because they don't necessarily understand how these things work historically. And just so y'all know, even though I talk about race a lot, A lot of prosecutors and a lot of people in my profession don't like to talk about race because they want to believe that the justice system is this perfect creation that does what it's supposed to do. And if you tell them that the system is messed up because of things like racism, sexism, homophobia, all that stuff, if you tell them that it's messed up, then it will crumble their full notion of what they do and who they are within the system. So to protect their notions, they say, no, it's perfect. Yet they can sit at a table in the DA's office and see no black people. They can sit at a table with, all kinds of police officers and see no black people, right? And think that's normal. There aren't many black people who are attorneys in general, let alone attorneys working in state prosecutors' offices, right? So it becomes increasingly difficult for victims of crimes who are black to be able to advance their issues against any infiltrator who is not part of our community. It's easy to prosecute a black person. Like if a black person do something to you, you can get that conviction quick. But if someone who is white or who is not black does something to a black person, it is very difficult to get justice for them. And that's why we need all of these extreme mechanisms. George Floyd has 9 eyewitnesses. He has videotape for days. He has all this stuff. And even then, even with all that evidence, we as black people still know that it doesn't take much for him to get off, right? That's the sadness.
Yeah. All right. So this is it for us. So join us again every Saturday.
Yes.
9:30 a.m. Pacific, 12:30 p.m. Eastern, 11:30 a.m. Central, and then if you live where Michael lives, it's 5:30 p.m. in Nigeria. 5:30 p.m. It's not really GMT Nigerian time, or 5:30 GMT in the spring. All right, so join us, subscribe us, buy some of this cool shirts and hoodies and t-shirts, and you can walk around with the swag like Jesse has.
Yes. And I just want to add to that, if you all know of any guests who you think would be good on the show, have them reach out to us. We don't bite, so have them reach out to us. We're happy to try to schedule. We are now booking for May, so if you know anybody who might be free on a Saturday in May, please shoot us a message, or if you yourself want to be on, shoot us a message and let us know. And we look forward to being able to continue to provide you guys great content.
All right, sure. Cool. So have a good weekend. Stay blessed.
Oh, yes. RIP to DMX, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Rest in peace. The DMX, for those, I think everybody knows at this point, but unfortunately, Earl Simmons, aka DMX, was hospitalized in the last week, and he was in a vegetative state for most of the week. But apparently, yesterday he finally passed away. I've seen people on the international level who are very, very sad to hear. I will say, as somebody who was following DMX even before he got famous, I just hope that the brother actually found some peace finally, because his life was very traumatic. There was a lot of stuff going on, but I love the fact that he was able to take his pain and put it into something productive and make himself a great career, both as a rapper, as an actor, just as like a quote unquote philosopher, like out of nowhere. If you've ever heard DMX's prayers,
he became a preacher too. I was really inspired. So this comes from a preacher. So I was really inspired by his one of his messages. He's preaching the gospel of Jesus. Very inspired, and I know he's in a better place right now. And I remember growing up back then when in Ghana, when we used to party and stuff, and we'll go to the club and they'll be playing DMX songs. So he wasn't just in the States, but it was all over. That's how come Michael too knows him. His raps and his inspiring words went, they rang throughout the world. Absolutely. And say God bless you, and we're glad we're around to see your great works. And God bless you till we meet again. Someone, Lydell, Like that was one of our past
Oh,
winners.
what's going on, man?
We won a Amazon gift card with us. Y'all fellas stay up. Another great show. I came in late. I'm gonna have to go back and watch it later. Sure. Thank you. Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you for watching.
Thank you for watching. We have it on YouTube. You can watch the replay on YouTube or on Facebook. But thanks for joining us again. Join us. Make sure you join us again next week.
Yes. We have some. We're working on some amazing things. We got some amazing people coming. So, I'll emphasize again. Reach out to us at the Pan-Africana Show on Instagram, because at some point we're gonna get booked solid, and you're not gonna be able to get on. So,
Exactly.
so yeah, definitely reach out to us. We got great stuff coming for you.
Sure. Take care. Bye, everyone.